The topic is character or conditions, ethical fading. So yesterday we talked about conditions or character. Not because character doesn't matter, it does, but because we can so easily forget conditions. And conditionality is not a teaching to deny responsibility, but it is a teaching to help us understand more deeply how things come to be. So there's a concept in ethics called ethical fading. And researchers describe it as what happens when ethical dimensions of a situation disappear from our view. And they disappear because we become so focused on something else, something like getting our way, or winning, or being right, or protecting our image, or achieving a goal. They come more into view, and we forget really the ethical questions. They fade into the background. And it's interesting in light of meditation practices that can overemphasize focusing or concentration or the present moment. I kind of think an ethical fading could parallel what happens if we get over-focused on a practice that focuses us on one thing and we forget about conditionality. So in focus, in like this very narrow focus, we stop seeing conditions and complexity. And it would be easier, of course, to start to believe in character or characters, believing people are what we think they are. And this is amplified by the way others in our world accept this, endorse it, and it's reinforced in our reading, in our groups. So I recently read an article about Marilyn Monroe, and it was entitled, "Remember Marilyn Monroe's Radical Politics." No, I don't remember that. She grew up in poverty and foster care, and these conditions really shaped how she took to heart and understood vulnerability and exclusion. She spoke up for people who were marginalized and supported causes that carried social risk at the time, gay rights, and also the right to be communist during the McCarthy era. But what remains in most of ours, in my collective memory, is often the image of her character as a sex symbol. It's really how I knew her. So the other person I'm bringing in is Mother Teresa. I guess I'm doing opposites today. In the recent years, there have been criticisms of Mother Teresa's work. And I noticed how easily my own mind wanted to rewrite the whole story. Yet before, during, and after that criticism, there were other realities. She lived with and helped the poorest people in society. She began a movement that brought nuns out from behind convent walls, and she suffered serious health problems from her calling. So when conditions disappear, character takes over. Saint, hero, fraud, kind of one word or one image that really represents the whole person. So I thought about this a little bit more with coming up with this talk, and am thinking perhaps forgetting conditions. I wouldn't really say it's necessarily unethical, but I think it's a doorway to ethical fading, and even a doorway at times to ethical blindness. When we stop seeing the conflict or contradictions that shape people, situations, and ourselves, we become more certain than is warranted. More judgmental, more convinced of our own rightness. And I see this in my life. I'm going to use an example of for what happens with me is I often get very anxious before impending medical procedures. Most of us probably do, or a big undertaking at my small home. And both of these are happening or should be happening this month. So I've been managing this double anxiety for the past few weeks. And seeing the conditions doesn't magically remove the anxiety. But I've been able to get at some of the conflicting incentives. I liked that word. This is from the Julie Diamond article. Conflicting incentives for each of the situations. And seeing into those, it gives me at least somewhere to stand within the anxiety, within this kind of cluster that I've been managing. And it's allowed me to respond to some of those in a more measured way, but mostly it's allowed me to attend the distress and be a little bit kinder to the anxiety that's up. And I also see that I can change some conditions, but mostly I learn to hold the others with greater kindness. So I've noticed something else in this anxiety. When I don't feel heard in preparing, I can begin to exaggerate. Things become very large. And if I think people don't understand me, I tend to shut down and lose myself rather than becoming more forceful. So seeing these conditions behind my responses, they don't necessarily excuse me or excuse what happens or make it harmless. Things come from the result of these tendencies. So very often I'm finding I have to pivot. I have to offer more explanation. I have to sometimes apologize or amend what I've said or done. And curiously at this time, and this is kind of, why I like writing Dharma talks, is because this is kind of new, is it doesn't feel good to grow the villain character, the doctor who I don't trust, or the contractor who doesn't respond professionally. And that makes me really happy to see that inclination fading. So this is where I see conditionality meeting ethics and where they both meet the teaching of impermanence. Because these conditions are not fixed, our habits are not fixed either. And the teaching of conditionality is not meant to be an excuse like, oh, I couldn't help it. Those were the conditions. Or that's just the way I am when this happens. Because I think that can be another form of ethical fading or of blindness. Rather, the direction of conditionality is to see things more clearly and participate in the changes that we can and take responsibility for the conditions that we're helping to create. So back to the researchers, they study this ethical fading, and they've noted that people, from their research, it's very easy to deceive ourselves, that we rename things, we soften our language, we tell stories that make harmful actions acceptable. And they see this as a kind of a dominant human tendency, that the mind is remarkably creative when protecting its own self-image. So while we have this reflex, this tendency to place ethical concerns behind other factors in our decision making, they say it's common. I'm seeing that reflective meditation helps counter it. That in this practice, which continually invites us to widen the lens, rather than reducing ourselves to or others to a fixed story, we have this focus on remembering conditions. And maybe this is one reason why the Buddhist teachings emphasize conditionality again and again and again. Not because conditions explain everything, but because forgetting them narrows our vision. Let's see, I'm ending with this, yeah. Conditions don't erase character. I think they reveal how character is continually being shaped. And because the conditions can change, we can change. And every moment that we bring with more awareness, every act of kindness, and every honest reflection, that becomes part of the conditions being created. So I feel like conditionality is both our responsibility, and our freedom. Okay, I'll end here.